Well, hello YouTube, Steve Patton with General Patton Bushcraft, back with you friends. I'm back out in the backyard. I got another super exciting video for you today. Today's video is Alone Season 13, Episode 2, the show notes to Episode 2. Spoiler alert, we had another tap out. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for stopping by General Patton's Bushcraft and Self-Reliance on YouTube. I appreciate everything you do for the channel and all your support. All right, friends, this is the official show notes, the official recap of Alone Season 13, Episode 2, titled Worlds Collide, Part 2. And we get to see a few more of the 10 participants get dropped off and what they can do in the first 5 days of the competition. They're up there in the Arctic. This is the second largest delta in the Arctic. It's a swamp. It's a wetland. There's lakes, rivers, ponds, waterways everywhere with a little bit of land in between. Let's get started on the first participant. Okay, friends, we know every show starts with a famous quote from a famous individual. And the famous quote is, quote, "Notice that the stiffest tree is most easily cracked, while the bamboo or willow survives by bending with the wind," unquote. That comes from Bruce Lee. All right, friends, it's day 1, 9:04, and this episode 2 starts out with Ziga. Ziga is the 35-year-old from Kosevji, Slovenia. He lays down on the moss and says, "So many mosquitoes out here. It's 48 degrees. He decides to do some exploring, and he's looking for Labrador tea. This is common up in bogs, swamps, and wetlands in North America, friends. And he finds a lot of big bear sign along the river. Also, some extremely large wolf tracks. And we know there's about 4,000 to 5,000 grizzlies in the Northwest Territories, friends. Tons and tons of mosquitoes, friends. They're just eating him alive. He collects some water. And again, we know Ziga, no ferro rod. And no participant has ever won without a ferro rod, friends, on the Alone show. So he fills a rubber boot with some water out of the river. It's pretty dirty and muddy looking. And he filters it with his shamog, friends. He's got his long boot upright. He puts the shamog in the water and he drapes it over the side of the boot, and it goes down into his cook pot. And it's a type of wicking action. It's called capillarity. And it's a technique for filtering that dirty water, friends. It's just filtering through that shamog, though. That's not going to do anything for the parasites or the bacteria. All right, it's day 1, 11:06, and the show goes over to Booth. He's the 54-year-old from Alaska, USA. And first thing he does is he puts a bright pink paracord lanyard on his Leatherman, and he ties it to his belt loop and puts it in his pocket. And he says that he's pretty forgetful, and he's not good keeping track of his accessories. But he does take care of the Leatherman, and he scouts out his area. And we know caribou are coming into the area for mating season. And these participants want to get they want big game. They want to get a moose. They want to get caribou, friends. Grizzlies are gorging themselves. They're getting ready for hibernation. So he builds a fire to purify some water. And friends, we got a major blunder. He forgot where he set that ferro rod when he built the fire. And he's sitting there sipping on some water after he boiled it, and he hears some crackling and popping in the fire. And wouldn't you know it, He built a fire right over his ferro rod, friends. And his ferro rod burns up in the fire. He's got about a mangled, 1-inch mangled piece of, looks like volcanic rock that used to be his 6-inch long ferro rod, friends. He burned it up. He tied that Leatherman to his belt loop, but he forgot about that ferro rod. All right, friends, it's still day one, but it's 3:13 p.m. now, and the show goes over to Poldy. Poldy is the 24-year-old from Hokitika, New Zealand, and he decides to grab his bow and have a look around, friends. He wraps a shamog around his head because the skeets and the black flies are something atrocious. They're thick up there in the Arctic this time of year. And he sets out to set some snares, friends. He's hiking around barefoot. He sees some grouse feeding on the water's edge, and he stalks barefoot, and he gets a shot off. He misses the first one, but the second one is a hit. So he gets a grouse on his second shot. Good on Poldy, the 24-year-old from New Zealand. Okay, friends, it's day two now, 8:02 in the morning. The show goes over to Booth, the 54-year-old from Alaska, USA, and he's in bed, laying in his sleeping bag, talking about that blunder that he did with the ferro rod. Screwed up, and he decides he needs a really good shelter, friends, to last out there. So he decides to make an A-frame structure, and he finds a beaver trail down to the river, and he sets a snare. And he's got about 1 inch left of that mangled ferro rod, friends. Okay, it's still day two. It's 12:47 now in the afternoon. The show goes back over to Poldy, the 24-year-old from Hokitika, New Zealand. And he's using those grouse guts for bait. He's down there fishing, friends. His strategy is to do a blend of fishing and hunting. He sees a large beaver. These are big boys. These are about 40-pounders, friends, in the water, eating some willow branches. And he can't shoot with the bow for regulations. They can only snare the beaver. He catches a small pike on those grouse guts. So good on Poldy. He sees a moose across the channel, friends. A little bit across the channel and downstream. So he strips down. He strips down, puts everything in his backpack, and wades across the channel. It's about chest deep, and he's wading across with his bow in his backpack. And he gets on those fresh moose tracks, friends, barefoot, and he decides to stop and puts his pants back on. And it's perfect for Poldy. He's downwind from that big old moose, so he starts stalking that moose barefoot. And that moose, he's busted. I think that moose saw him all along, and that moose is staying ahead quite a bit of ways. And it's 58 degrees. It's still pretty warm out, friends, so that meat can spoil pretty quick out there when it's warm. So he decides not to take a shot. The moose is a little bit too far away. So I think that was a real good choice on Poldy's part. Okay, it's day two, 12:11 p.m. The show goes back over to Zika, the 35-year-old from Kosevje, Slovenia. And he is getting swarmed by black flies, friends. It's no joke. I don't know what he put on his face, but he covered his face with something. And he's setting snares in the forest, friend. And these black flies are eating him up. And his strategy, we learn, is mostly passive. He's not much into hunting, so he's going to try to set some snares and starts to look for a permanent shelter spot. And he's looking for a location that faces south. He plans on going deep into the winter, and he wants the warmth from that sun on him and his shelter for as long as possible. And friends, he hikes and hikes and hikes, And he hikes 3 miles away from his drop-off point, and he decides that's going to be the new spot, 3 miles away, the new location for Ziga. Okay, it's still day 2, 3:04 p.m. now, and the show goes over to Aaron. We get our first look at Aaron. He's the 40-year-old from British Columbia, Canada. And today's agenda for Aaron is to work on that permanent shelter. He's making a log cabin hybrid lean-to built off of some pretty good-sized logs, friends. And while logging, he hears a squirrel, friends, in the forest there next to his clearing, and he gets 2, 3, 4 shots off and misses all 4 shots, friends. Wow-wee. He's going to be looking for those arrows for a long time, friends. He's on the hunt for 4 missing arrows. 4 shots on 1 squirrel. All right, day 3 now, 9:18 in the morning. And the show goes back over to Ziga, the 35-year-old from Kosevje, Slovenia. And he's checking his snare, his trap lines, and he's got a rabbit in one of his snares, friends. This is Ziga with no ferro rod. He decides to cook that rabbit the next day. He's not going to eat it today, because today he's packing up all of his belongings and he's moving to the new location 3 miles away. All right, day 3, 11:08 in the morning, and the show goes back over to Aaron, the 40-year-old from British Columbia, Canada. And he's putting a lot of hard work, friends, into his log cabin permanent shelter. It's started to rain. His shelter's just about done, though, so he takes that tarp and he puts it over. He puts all of his gear underneath the structure, underneath that tarp. Here's a squirrel. Grabs bow and he heads into the forest. He's being very careful, friends. Aaron's already lost 1 arrow. He only has 8 left. He finds a safe shot, friends, and he nails that squirrel. Now Aaron wants to do some fishing. He wants to get those guts out of the squirrel. Smart on Aaron. And he makes a long fishing pole out of some alder, flexible but yet strong. He sets some passive fishing lines. Matter of fact, he sets 6 of them, friends. He gets all 6 of them set on the riverbank, and then he starts calling for moose. His strategy is clear. Passive snares, passive fishing, and then hunting for big game. And he wants a moose or some caribou, friends. Problem with calling in those moose, you're also calling in grizzlies. And no binoculars, friends. They're not allowed to bring them. So way downriver, he sees what he thinks is a grizzly. And so he starts heading back to where he set the fishing poles. He's got a bear banger loaded. He's got the cap off his bear spray. And he's got his horn ready to go, friends. And he starts heading back. He sits down for a little while on the riverbank. He wants to let that grizzly get away. He doesn't want anything to do with that grizzly. He finally makes it back to the fishing poles that he's got set on the bank. And friends, he catches a big 40-inch pike, friends. This is about 2,500 calories. So good on Aaron. All right, still day 3, 2:17 p.m. The show goes over to Andrew. He's the 51-year-old from Wales, United Kingdom, and he sets out to set up some trap lines. He wants to snare a rabbit. He builds a big, not big, but a nice rabbit trap. This thing is pretty good looking. Thing of beauty. And it's raining, so he's sitting under his tarp underneath his shelter, friends, and he's making up a bunch of snares for some passive snaring. Okay, friends, it's day 42 now, 8:42 in the morning. The show goes over to Ziga. It's rained all night, friends, and Ziga is already dressed in his winter clothing. Checks some snares, and he traps another bigger snowshoe. He got one the day before, right before he moved. Now he got a bigger one. So here's where it's getting interesting, friends. No ferro rod, so he processes up a bunch of what he thinks is dry wood and tinder and stuff. And he tries for a few hours, friends, with the bow drill that he makes to get a fire going. No bueno, friends. You can't get everything is damp up there. It's not like doing a bow drill in your backyard, friends, where everything is dry. This is no joke. This is up in the Arctic where everything is damp, humid, and you're in a wetland, friends. So he gets a good idea. He takes his wood and his bow drill and his spindle and everything, and he puts it inside of his jacket. And he says he's going to wear this and keep that next to his body, and he's going to try the bow drill the next day, friends. Okay, friends, it is day 4, 11:22 in the morning, and the show goes back over to Booth, 54-year-old from Alaska, USA, and he's drinking some water from the river without boiling it, friends. And we learned for the first 4 days he's been drinking straight out of that river and no boiling. He's got no ferro rod. He's only got 1 inch of mangled up piece of something that he pulled out of the fire. He goes down and checks that snare that he set on that beaver slide, and friends, he catches a big old 40-pound beaver. This is about 20,000 calories, friends. And grizzlies can smell dead carcasses up to 20 miles away, so he decides to gut that beaver on the riverbank. He doesn't want to do it up close to camp. And so he gets back to camp with that gutted beaver and tries to get a fire going. He wants to smoke that meat. Friends, he can't get a fire going. That ferro rod is toast. It's not creating any sparks, friends. That little tiny piece of mangled nothing is worthless. And we kind of knew this was coming, friends. Booth taps out. Booth taps out on day 4. That beaver that he trapped and gutted, it did not go to waste. The meat and the pelt was given to the native peoples, the Gwich'in peoples, in those Northwest Territories, friends. So the beaver didn't go to waste. All right, it's day 5, 8:27 p.m. There's 8 people remain, and the show goes over to Andrew, the 51-year-old from Wales, United Kingdom, and he's chewing on some alder cones, and woo-wee, these things are nasty. They taste like unripe nuts, friends. So he chokes those things down, sets out to go look at his trap lines, checks the snares, got nothing. He tries some fishing down on the river. He made a lure with some red and yellow paracord, nothing. Goes back and checks the snares one more time on the way back to camp, and he gets a small squirrel in one of those snares, friends. So now he's got some fishing bait. 5 days in, for Andrew from Wales, United Kingdom, he gets 1 squirrel. All right, it's day 5 now, 2:04 p.m., and the show goes back over to Ziga. He's the one that didn't bring a ferro rod. He's also snared 2 rabbits that he needs to smoke or cook up fry them or put them in a stew or something. And so he gets those dried materials out of his sleeping bag, friends. He slept with them all night, had them in his jacket all day. He gets that bow drill fired up, and about 2:38, he's got some smoke. About 2:57 p.m., lots of smoke. He's got an ember in a bird's nest, friends, and about 3:10 p.m., he's got fire, and he's super happy, friends. And he's smoking 3 rabbits that he's got hung up on a tripod. Ooh-wee, good on Ziga. No ferro rod up there in in the Arctic, friends. He gets a fire going and the show ends right there. All right, friends, there you have it. That's the show notes. That's the official recap of Alone Season 13, Episode 2, titled Worlds Collide Part 2. And we've had 2 individuals already tap out. 8 people remain. Hit the subscribe button. Give the video a like. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing the recap, the official show notes on all of these episodes for Season 13. And I appreciate you stopping by the channel, friends. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. All your views, all your likes, all your shares. Most importantly, all your comments. Leave me a comment. Let me know who you think's going to win this thing. I tell you what, Aaron's looking strong. Pedrosa's looking strong. Will's looking strong. All right. Please, please don't depart from the faith. And if you haven't already, give your life to Christ. Do it today. Don't wait. And as always, God is good. God is great. I see y'all on the next video. Already got a date.